There is a moment in every man's life when he quietly wonders why strength feels so hard to grasp. Not physical strength, but the kind that shapes decisions, builds discipline, and guides a man when no one is watching. Centuries ago, Miyamoto Musashi uncovered a brutal truth. Most men are not defeated by the world, but by three invisible forces inside themselves. Approval addiction, avoidance of discomfort, and the endless chase of desire. These three internal traps do not break a man all at once, they drain him slowly, quietly, until he becomes a shadow of who he could be. Musashi understood this long before modern psychology had words for it. He saw men lose their direction because they depended on praise to feel valuable. He watched warriors crumble because they avoided the very challenges that could have made them stronger. And he realized that the cravings most people call normal for pleasure, attention, distraction could turn a man into a captive of his own impulses. To Musashi, true strength was not about power or dominance. It was about freedom. Freedom from needing validation, freedom from running away, and freedom from the desires that control so many lives. Today, his insights matter as much as ever, because while the world has changed, the internal battles remain the same. And if you understand how these three weaknesses work, you can break free from them just as Musashi did. If you are ready to explore this journey of inner strength, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring more stories, lessons, and powerful insights from history's greatest minds. Now, let us step into the world of Musashi and uncover the real foundations of strength. Musashi's understanding of internal weakness did not exist in isolation. It shaped everything he became and every battle he ever won. After recognizing how approval, comfort, and desire could quietly consume a man from the inside, he did something few warriors of his time ever considered. He turned his attention to the minds of others. To Musashi, every opponent carried within him the same vulnerabilities, the same hidden cracks beneath the surface, and the same quiet fears that most men tried to bury. And he realized that if he could see those cracks clearly enough, he could defeat a man long before steel ever touched steel. This insight transformed the way he approached conflict. Where others prepared by sharpening blades, he prepared by sharpening perception. He observed how a man carried himself, how he breathed, how he hesitated when he thought no one was watching. He paid attention to the way someone reacted to uncertainty, to silence, to eye contact. Musashi knew that the body revealed everything the mouth tried to hide. A trembling hand, a shallow breath, a tightening at the jaw, these were signs of fear that no amount of training could disguise. And once he detected them, he did not simply exploit them. He magnified them. Sometimes he would arrive at a duel later than expected, not out of arrogance, but because he understood what waiting could do to a man's nerves. Other times he would stand perfectly still, letting his opponent's imagination do the damage for him. The moment that fear took root, Musashi no longer needed to overpower anyone. The opponent defeated himself. But this mastery did not come from cruelty or the desire to dominate others. It grew from Musashi's belief that every battle is won internally first. He had spent years confronting his own shadows in solitude, wrestling with doubt, fear, and the pull of desire. Through this self-discipline, he learned how fragile the human mind could be, including his own. That knowledge did not make him ruthless. It made him precise. He respected the weight of fear because he had overcome it in himself. And by overcoming it, he developed an unsettling calmness, one that many described as the most frightening part of facing him. His gaze alone could unsettle a trained warrior, because it held the stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to fear. Every encounter he experienced reinforced a truth that guided the rest of his life. Strength is not established in the clash of blades, but in the silence before the fight begins. While others relied on technique, reputation, or physical force, Musashi relied on his ability to see the truth in a man's eyes. He understood that an opponent burdened by the need for approval would hesitate, that a man who avoided discomfort would crumble when pressured, and that someone ruled by desire would act on impulse rather than clarity. These weaknesses, rooted deep within, created openings far more devastating than any exposed stance. Through this psychological insight, Musashi elevated the art of combat into something far greater than a physical contest. He transformed it into a study of human nature. His victories were not the result of brute strength or luck. They were the natural outcome of understanding people better than they understood themselves. And in recognizing the fears of others, he confirmed the value of his own journey, the solitude he embraced, the discomfort he sought, and the mastery he gained over desire gave him the one thing every warrior sought but few ever achieved: an unshakable mind. And with that, Musashi proved that the true battlefield is always within. After mastering the art of reading others, Musashi turned the same relentless attention inward. Recognizing that the greatest battles were never fought on the battlefield, but within the confines of his own mind, he understood that to truly become invincible, he needed to face what he called the three inner demons: the persistent whisper of doubt that undermined confidence, the reliance on others for validation and support that weakened resolve, and the paralyzing grip of fear that shackled potential before it could ever be realized. These were not fleeting obstacles, but deep-rooted forces that had the power to destroy even the most skilled warrior if left unchallenged. And Musashi knew that avoiding them would condemn him to mediocrity, no matter how many duels he won. Choosing solitude as his weapon, he withdrew from society, from companionship, from distractions that could soften the edge of his mind. Mountains became his classrooms, caves his meditation halls, and the harsh rhythms of isolation his teachers. In this deliberate withdrawal, he confronted each demon without compromise. Doubt, which whispered that he was not enough, forced him to rely solely on the truth of his own abilities rather than external affirmation. Addiction to others, the craving for approval or comfort, became a mirror that reflected the emptiness of depending on anyone else for strength, teaching him that true power emerges only from self-reliance. And fear, the most cunning of all, was faced head-on through daily rituals that simulated the inevitability of death, exposing the futility of running from what is unavoidable and transforming apprehension into clarity. These years of solitude were not passive or easy. They were a crucible that demanded absolute honesty and unyielding discipline. Musashi endured the harshness of silence, the weight of boredom, and the gnawing loneliness that would have broken lesser men. But each trial honed his mind like a blade, making him impervious to panic, distraction, or manipulation. He discovered that when the mind is free from doubt, unshackled from dependence, and no longer dominated by fear, every action becomes deliberate, every decision precise, and every reaction measured. The self-mastery he achieved was not theoretical or abstract. It was practical, demonstrated in every movement, every strategy, and every confrontation he would later face. By embracing this extreme solitude, Musashi cultivated a state of being that transcended ordinary strength. He no longer sought to impress others or gain their favor, and the fear of failure no longer dictated his choices. Instead, he operated from a foundation of absolute internal authority, one that allowed him to confront challenges with serenity and act with uncompromising effectiveness. His victories, both mental and physical, became the natural consequence of this self-mastery, and his understanding of human nature, both his own and that of others, reached heights unattainable by those who never ventured into the depths of solitude. In this way, Musashi's retreat from the world was not an escape, but a bold advance into the heart of strength itself. A journey that forged a man whose power was measured not in what he could defeat externally, but in the unbreakable dominion he held over himself. In the depths of his solitary retreats, Musashi developed a practice that many would consider extreme, Yet it became the cornerstone of his unshakable mind. Every day at dawn, he confronted the inevitability of his own death. He did not merely acknowledge it in passing. He immersed himself in it fully, imagining the final moments of his life with vivid clarity, envisioning every detail of his body failing, every sensation of loss and dissolution, and the silence that would follow. At first, the practice was terrifying, even for a man already hardened by duels and discipline. But Musashi understood that true courage is not the absence of fear but the mastery over it. By repeatedly facing death in this controlled and deliberate way, he gradually stripped it of its power to paralyze, until the concept of dying no longer inspired panic but became a tool for liberation. This daily confrontation with mortality had profound effects on his mind and spirit. Where ordinary men were bound by the fear of failure, rejection, or loss, Musashi found that those fears were merely branches of a single, deeper root, the fear of death itself. Once he had walked through that root repeatedly, its branches withered. Challenges that once seemed daunting, the anticipation of battle, the uncertainty of outcomes, the unpredictability of life lost their ability to intimidate him. He moved through the world with a calmness that appeared almost unnatural to those around him, a presence that radiated certainty and composure because he had already experienced the ultimate unknown in his imagination countless times. This practice also honed his focus. By accepting the inevitability of death, he learned to value each action for its true weight, to engage fully in every moment without hesitation, and to see through the illusions of superficial concerns. Small setbacks no longer unsettled him, and the judgments of others could not disturb his equilibrium. Musashi's mind became a still lake, reflecting reality with clarity, unshaken by ripples of doubt or distraction. He discovered that when a man transcends the fear of death, he transcends all fears. The anxieties that tether most men to mediocrity dissolve, leaving only decisive clarity and unwavering resolve. In practical terms, this mental discipline transformed how he approached combat and life alike. Opponents who relied on intimidation or psychological pressure found no purchase against him, because he had rehearsed and mastered the worst that could happen long before the fight began. In every encounter, whether in duels, strategy, or daily life, Musashi moved as one who had nothing to lose, whose presence alone unsettled those who sought to test him. The fear that drives men to hesitate or make errors had no hold on him, and in that freedom, he became capable of feats that would seem impossible to the untrained mind. Through this ritual, Musashi achieved what few ever do, the liberation of the mind from its deepest constraints. By embracing death as a daily companion, he transformed inevitability into a source of ultimate strength, turning the most universal fear into a foundation for mastery. In doing, he demonstrated that the path to true invincibility lies not in avoiding danger or clinging to life, but in understanding its limits, confronting them without flinching, and using that understanding to navigate the world with courage, precision, and absolute calm. As Musashi's understanding of himself and the human mind deepened, he began to see patterns, principles that could guide not just survival, but the cultivation of true strength. A strength that transcended mere skill with a sword or the fleeting admiration of others. He recognized that comfort, so often pursued by men as if it were a refuge, was in reality a subtle enemy, dulling the mind and numbing the spirit. To grow beyond ordinary limits, he embraced discomfort, seeking situations that tested his endurance, patience, and resolve. Whether scaling mountains, enduring harsh winters in isolation, or confronting challenges that would make most men turn back, he welcomed struggle as a teacher, understanding that every moment of difficulty forged resilience, clarity, and an unshakable sense of purpose. Alongside this, he confronted the tyranny of impulses, the pull of desire, and the compulsion to react without deliberation. Musashi observed that men who surrendered to cravings for food, for pleasure, for recognition were never free, no matter how much power or skill they accumulated. He disciplined himself to act deliberately, to master his impulses, and to let reason and self-control guide every decision. In doing, he transformed his body and mind into instruments of precision, capable of extraordinary focus and efficiency, free from the distractions that trap ordinary men in cycles of indulgence and regret. Equally transformative was his understanding of loneliness, not as a punishment but as a crucible for self-knowledge. By stepping away from companionship, from the need to impress or be supported by others, Musashi discovered the raw, unfiltered truth of his own capabilities. He learned to rely solely on his judgment, to find strength within, and to cultivate an inner presence so complete that it could not be shaken by praise, criticism, or the absence of recognition. In solitude, he discovered that external validation was meaningless compared to the certainty that comes from self-reliance and clarity of purpose, and that the pursuit of approval was a chain that bound most men, leaving them vulnerable and incomplete. From these experiences, Musashi distilled what would become the framework of his philosophy, the unwritten laws that defined true masculine strength. They were not abstract ideals but practical guides forged in the relentless realities of life, combat, and meditation. By embracing discomfort, a man could develop resilience that no circumstance could erode. By mastering impulses, he could act with authority and precision, unclouded by fleeting passions. By accepting loneliness, he could discover an unshakable self-sufficiency. And by rejecting external validation, he could move through the world with confidence, unconcerned with the shifting opinions and judgments of others. These principles were intertwined, each reinforcing the other, creating a holistic approach to strength that was psychological, emotional, and moral as much as it was physical. Through these disciplines, Musashi became more than a warrior. He became a living embodiment of self-mastery, a man whose presence alone commanded respect and whose decisions reflected clarity and authority. He demonstrated that true strength arises not from domination of others, but from the dominion one achieves over oneself, and that the journey toward mastery is not measured by victories in battle, but by the consistency with which a man lives according to principles that cultivate resilience, discipline, and integrity. In embracing discomfort, mastering impulses, accepting loneliness, and rejecting external validation, Musashi not only defined what it meant to be strong but also illuminated a path that any man could follow to rise above weakness and live with unshakable purpose and presence. In the quiet reflection of his later years, Musashi reached a truth so simple yet so profound that it would forever change the way we understand strength. He realized that a man's power is not measured by what he can accumulate, what he can conquer, or even what he can control in the world around him. True strength, Musashi concluded, is measured by what a man can live without. The chains of dependency, the hunger for approval, the constant need for companionship, the relentless chase for recognition and success, these are what ensnare most men and leave them fragile, vulnerable, and incomplete. A man who can walk through life unshaken by the absence of these things has discovered a freedom and confidence that no external force can take away. This is the paradox that Musashi discovered. The less a man clings to the approval of others, the more naturally respect flows to him. The less he demands constant company, the more people are drawn to his presence. The less he obsesses over success, the more success arrives without effort. By letting go, by relinquishing the need to prove, to impress, or to control outcomes, a man becomes magnetic in ways that striving alone can never achieve. It is not a lesson of passivity, but of mastery over self and circumstance. Musashi lived this lesson in every duel he fought, every challenge he faced, and every moment of solitude he embraced. He became a man so grounded in his own purpose and strength that the world's opinions, obstacles, and distractions no longer held sway over him. And yet, This truth is not reserved for a few extraordinary warriors. It is a path that any man, in any, can follow if he is willing to confront his inner demons and discipline himself with honesty, courage, and patience. It begins with small acts, resisting the urge for constant approval, facing discomfort instead of avoiding it, practicing control over impulses, and learning to find fulfillment within oneself. Over time, these choices accumulate, forging a mind and spirit that are unshakable, resilient, and free. Strength becomes not a performance for others but a state of being, a quiet power that commands without demanding, influences without coercion, and endures without relying on circumstance. As we reflect on Musashi's life and teachings, it is clear that his legacy is not the number of duels he won or the enemies he defeated, but the timeless wisdom he imparted. Freedom from need is the gateway to invincibility. When a man stops seeking what he cannot control, he gains mastery over what truly matters: the mind, the will, and the spirit. And in that mastery, he discovers a life that is richer, more focused, and infinitely more powerful than anything external could ever provide. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the mind of Miyamoto Musashi and the secrets of true strength. If this story resonated with you and you want to continue exploring the lessons of history's greatest minds, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new insight. Your commitment to learning and growth is the first step toward your own path of mastery and resilience.